welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. That's how we get the word out, all the fun stuff, so we get great guests on. Today, our guest, Elise, is from the same province I'm in, so I think that's really cool. We didn't know each other until like 5 minutes ago, basically. So really cool. She runs a company called Pony Friday, started it 12 years ago, used to be an ad agency, felt restricted, changed into this so she could have some more freedom and creativity. Has a cool program that sounds fun called Kiss My Pony, which is great. Thanks for being on the podcast, Elise.
Oh my gosh, Angela, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. I feel like you and I are just having easy banter because we have so many similarities and know so many similar places.
Yes, I agree. So tell us a little bit about, because I always like to go this, from the ad agency to Pony Friday. Tell us a little bit about, if think back, why we went into ad and then why we got out, and then what was that transition like? I know you mentioned before that it was kind of easy at the beginning. So I'd love to hear more about that and maybe how it got harder toward the middle.
So getting into advertising was not easy. So that part wasn't. Anytime you're going into an industry where you do not have connections, it's really difficult to break in. So that initial getting into advertising was hard. And then after I kind of made a name for myself and popped around a little bit, worked at a few agencies, won a bunch of awards, I just felt really constricted. So I had a reputation at that point for doing great stuff, winning awards. And so when I transitioned out of that, because I felt like, oh, I don't want to be my bosses, I just felt like I wasn't fulfilling my quest as a human to be my creative best. So I went out and started Pony Friday. And the first couple of years of Pony Friday were deceptively easy because I had a reputation. So it's easy when everybody knows you and you don't understand that you need to be consistently networking and meeting with people and making sure people know you, because when you're in an agency and you're mingling at social events with other people and people change jobs within agencies, they naturally know who you are. As soon as you go out and start your own thing, if it's little, which Pony Friday is a tiny entity, then all of a sudden you're having to make all of that effort to make sure that you're maintaining connections. And that, understanding that part of it was really challenging as somebody who skews introverted.
I understand introverted. I'm introverted too, so this is great. So you started out though, and you had all these connections, so it kind of started out kind of easy. And then at what point did it start to be like, oh no, like I'm not making enough to pay the bills? Did it go through that phase? And then how did you get through it?
So because I am a boss lady, I like to put my creative needs first. And I did have a townhouse. I ended up selling my townhouse to continue my Pony Friday quest and leveraging what I had. But part of it is you kind of have to think about, what am I learning? Like if I was going to school to be a super specialized medical practitioner, I would look at the investment I'm making into myself and think, okay, well, this is great. It's going to pay off later. It's difficult when you're going on a path that is less charted. Other people might have taken similar paths, but nobody has been on this precise path. And it is a little bit unstable. So you're betting on yourself. And a lot of times they say entrepreneurs are gambling. And part of it is gambling because you have to be putting in the work and you have to be learning consistently in order to master those skills. And there you can recognize that there's a gap between what you know and how well you have to do something. So like my good enough is often not good enough. Like there's a discrepancy and I can see it. So I don't want my best. I want the best possible. So knowing my own limitations, like how do I get there? And it's not easy. Sometimes it is trying to mingle and meet the right people, or like hiring coaches and kind of getting a little DNA from this person and a little DNA from that person. So I have invested tons of money into professional development and coaches that are not maybe sanctioned by a larger body where they had some accreditation. Like I'm on a creative path. So even when I went to ad school, like it wasn't an accredited institution. So you're going through this kind of uncharted waters. Like it's always a storm. And so I've had many, many ups and downs. And a lot of it has to do with deciding the kind of work you want. So just because you can make money at something doesn't mean that that's the path that you want to go through. And I feel like I was in financial kind of difficulty prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of 4 or 5x my debt. And that was really interesting because then I feel like the universe is always asking me, how bad do you want this?
Mhm.
Because if you don't want it bad enough, you don't get it. And then that's why nobody chooses the path to go out on their own and chart their own path because it is too hard. Like it's too hard. But if you accept that it is too hard and you're willing to continue showing up, like my whole thing about sharing my story is that like I'm in the mud. So I'm not, oh, wow, I made it to the other side and look, we're so successful. That's not the narrative.
Wow. So there was a lot in there. I'm just like listening. I'm like, ooh. There was a lot in there. But I want listeners to pay attention to a couple things I really want you to get out of that. She sold her property to keep her business. If you're an entrepreneur, which I think a lot of people listening to this are or wanting to be, what are you willing to do? How much do you believe in yourself? Because, I love that Elise said that because I think that's the biggest thing. It is gambling on yourself. And I know when I started my business, I was like, I'm going to win. Like, I just believe in myself. Like, that's something I'm really blessed that I have extreme self-confidence, and always have. But if you don't, you're listening to this, and maybe this is something you can touch on, Elise. Did you always have self-confidence, or how did you help grow it? So you're willing to invest in yourself. You're willing to you haven't thrown in the towel. You're still doing the things. What are some ways that you have keep building your self-confidence and self-belief so that you could keep going?
I definitely suffer from bouts of low self-confidence. I would say extreme lows. I have a lot of anxiety, and I think there's a conviction that I can do it over time. And I like to share that I want to peak at 80. Like that's my goal. So if I want to peak at 80, then I have time to figure it out. If I think that I'm supposed to achieve this, in the next 5 years, then I'm stressed. That is like, I don't think that's doable. But if I look at, okay, well, does it matter when I reach success? I have this kind of thought like, oh, well, what else would I be doing? If I wasn't trying to reach my potential, and let's say I reached my potential today, then what am I doing for the rest of my life? Coasting downhill? Like to me, if I aspire to peak at 80, then I know that it's an uphill climb. And then my anxiety and my shaky self-confidence are part of the journey. I expect them. I'm not expecting to feel completely confident about something that I haven't done yet. Like, I think like I was talking to my friend the other day about how we're on a rope bridge and people are like swaying the rope bridge and we're trying to cross, and we wanted to be on the rope bridge crossing the big like crevasse. We wanted to be there. So if we expect it to be wobbly and feeling like we want to throw up, then we recognize that as we're in the right place.
I like that analogy. And I really like how so when you set yourself up like you are, you're expecting it to be hard and you to fail almost a little bit. So it's not oh my gosh, this isn't for me. It's like, well, it's just kind of what happens.
Well,
Um,
they say, Angela, that if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
it's true. It's true.
So if I'm well, okay,
I
so
love
here's
that.
the analogy that I've been really embracing. So a few years ago, I decided like there was this whole narrative about, oh, women just need to lean in. And I'm like, no, because leaning in just puts you in a position to fall on your face more frequently. But if you lean back, right, when you're relaxed, you lean back and it puts you in a different position. And so we want to be leaning back and relaxed into the journey. And it gives me chills just thinking about that. Like, how am I going to lean back when there's all this chaos? Like, this is crazy. And sometimes we have to allow things to fall out of place so that the other things can fall into place. I love something that you said. If you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. I want to know where that came from.
Um, well, I just think a lot of people, and I don't know if I said that or you said that anyway, but
No,
I think a lot.
I read that on the social profile of
Oh, okay,
yours.
cool. I was like, where did that come from? Again, like, I was like, I don't know.
Those are your
I say
words.
so many things. That's cool. So I just think, people a lot of times argue for their limitations. And I'll give you an example for me. For instance, like I touched on before, I know I was diagnosed with MS in 2019. That could be an argue for a limitation. Well, I can't
Mm-hmm.
do that because I have MS. I can't do that because I'm a female. I can't do that because I'm a male. I can't do that because
Mm-hmm.
I'm single. I can't do that because I have kids. I can't do that. And people say this stuff all the time. I can't do
Mm-hmm.
that because I wasn't born in a wealthy family, or I was born in a wealthy family, or like I have no arm, or I have no
Yeah.
legs, or I have like, I've heard all the excuses. I've also seen all those people do the things that have all those things. So
Mm-hmm.
one group of people says this is my limitation, I can't do it. And one group of people says, because this is what's happening, therefore I can win. Because I know how to deal with it,
Yes.
therefore I can win. And you
There's
start to embrace the tough instead of making it your excuse.
I really like puzzles. So I think that's part of it, of this whole thing of just, okay, well, I know that this goes together. I know that there's some way that this fits together. And maybe that's part of it, is you see the limitations, but something inside you says, there's got to be a way. And I might have tried many, many times, but I still am convinced that there's got to be a way. And if I can't figure it out in a week, am I going to quit? That's the question. If
Hmm.
I can't figure it out in 5 weeks, in 5 months, in 5 years, like, how long are you giving yourself? And I can't remember who said it, but there was this whole thing about, why are we putting a time frame on it? Like, if we haven't completed this task before, how do we know how long it would take?
I love that because yeah, too many people quit too soon. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so knowing where that is. So on the days that when you started and went through some of these tough times, do you have a lot of people over the last, 12 years or whatever, kind of tell you, you should quit, you should go back to work, you should get a steady job, reliable paycheck, all that kind of stuff?
What?
How did you handle that?
Well, I mean, I've definitely heard all sorts of things. And the worst is when it comes from inside your head. That's the worst. Like, if somebody externally, like, this is what happens though, I open the door for it. So if I was venting to someone about being frustrated as an entrepreneur, it's almost as though you don't get to, because people think that you're living this like weird kind of fantasy version of life. And so if you complain to somebody with a full-time job about it, they're like, well, just quit and get a job. Like, if it's not what it's cracked up to be. But I gave them permission. Like, I opened the narrative up. So I have to recognize why I allowed that to happen. But when it happens inside my head, like, there have been some really difficult financial times. I'm not through them, and they will come again. That's the thing I have to remember, is I will figure this dip out in the entrepreneurial roller coaster, and it's not going to be level from here. There's going to be future dips. So how do I protect myself from future dips? How do I mentally prepare for them? And how do I coach myself that we can figure this out and we can get out of it? Because often I have applied for jobs, because I always say this. I'm like, okay, so we're exploring all possibilities. And that's one possibility, that maybe in order to bridge the gap, I have to explore these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of unemployable just because I've been out on my own so much, of just doing my own thing. And there's a lot of beautiful autonomy that comes from running your own show. I had a little team before the pandemic started, and the pandemic kind of like took that away. But I kept them a little bit longer than I should have, but nobody knew. People were closing up shop, and I decided we would just kind of like ride it out. They ended up finding other jobs, which was great. And I went in the hole, which was not so great. But you know what debt teaches you that nothing else can teach you? That you have to put your own needs first. And especially as a woman, it can be particularly difficult when other people are in distress around you. Like if you're unwell, the only thing that you have to do and take care of, the only thing that you can take care of is yourself to get yourself well. So if you're financially unwell, same thing. You have to focus on your own needs. Gives you permission to say no to a whole bunch of things you may have previously entertained, and you're like focused. And when I'm a smaller entity, like I have a couple like contracts, one little part-time support staff, and I keep way more money because I haven't figured out how to scale up and maximize money. You don't really realize how much extra it costs you to have a team member.
Mhm. I like that. So, you know, it's finding the positive, I guess, in the downsides is really important, and not like venting to people that don't understand. That's why, you want to surround yourself with, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to surround yourself with other entrepreneurs that understand what you're going through on a granular level. And I'm guessing that's
And
something that's been important to you.
Um, I love that you touched on that because often that's in books, often that's in hiring coaches. There is going to be gaps between relationships because you're evolving. Like as an entrepreneur, you're evolving at a rate that other people just aren't. You're kind of like a teenager. And if you remember being a teenager, like you probably had some tumultuous friendships. You probably had shifting of friend groups, and you probably had this I don't know where I fit anymore. And entrepreneurship is very much like that. And I have found sometimes you're very isolated and you want and you need somebody. Sometimes you just have to hire a mentor. Sometimes you have to just find a good book and relate that way because there won't be, a quote unquote bestie or somebody who understands what you're going through.
So good. And this explains, I was like listening, I'm like, oh, that's what it is. So that's homeschooled. So I'm like, I never had
Okay,
tumultuous upbringing in my high
right.
school. So that's probably why this hasn't been as tough for me as I see for some people. Because I just was like, oh, I'm used to being by myself anyways.
Sure, no, because you already built those resources inside yourself. Like you were already conditioned for that. That's so interesting. I love that because so many times, like when I've interacted with people, they'll say, "Oh, I wish I met you when I was younger," and then I would go on this path. Like I feel like sometimes our existence as entrepreneurs helps other people give themselves permission to pursue something else.
Yes.
But they'll, like you were talking about limitations before, they'll say, well, I can't because I'm too old. I can't
Yeah.
because I have a certain requirement of income with my family. I can't put, my house in jeopardy. I can't downsize. Like what happens is we have to be willing to topple the apple cart, right? If you can't topple the apple cart, it won't work.
Yes. Can't does not get you to where you want to go in life. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. So what are some you've started something that you said you're passionate about, so I'd love to know more, called Kiss Your Pony. Tell us a little bit about what that is and
It's
what's
it's
what's
called
your
Kiss
vision.
My Pony. It's a
Kiss my
little
pony.
twist on Kiss Mop, you know.
KSS.
So, Kiss My Pony is a online community. So it's an app, and I created it 4 years ago during the pandemic to satisfy my own needs for community, for support, for coaching, all of those things. But I also was really frustrated. There's a whole industry of gurus that upsells you on things, charges you too much, and it costs a lot to get into mastermind groups. So it's a kind of peer-to-peer coaching portal. So I'm the host, but I'm not the guru. I have mindset workshops. I'm there to learn, and it's a wonderful place. And the best part is I'm a little bit introverted, so I have never worried that there weren't very many people in there. It's a micro community. Because I built it for me. Like we go to the gym to work out. We're focused on our bodies, but if we want personal growth and we're personal growth junkies, a lot of people just read and they never apply it. So this is an opportunity for people to have conversations about their own limitations and have other members say, oh, that sounds like a limiting belief. Or when I have encountered this, I've tried these and I've found that helpful. And I need that. I need somebody to say, Elise, that sounds like a limiting belief, right? Because sometimes we don't hear it.
That's so good. I like that. And so what is your vision with your company and with this, and where do you want to go in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see for where you want to head?
Yeah, so Pony Friday makes the majority of its money doing marketing and branding for, I'd say, large membership organizations. And I enjoy that. I really do. But my big vision is to have Pony Friday's income come from Pony Friday stuff. So the Kids My Pony community, a little bit from merch. I wrote a book 4 years ago. So I want this whole thing to kind of be like its own. I kind of always think in my mind that I want Pony Friday to be kind of like the Disneyland for personal growth.
Disneyland for personal growth. Wow, that sounds really cool.
Yeah,
I love it.
right.
And you wrote a book 4 years ago, so that was just before the pandemic.
Yeah, I was
Wow.
I was going into publish, like self-publish, right as the pandemic was starting, and I was like, yeah, that was a difficult time,
So what is the
but
book about? Tell us a little bit about that.
so the book is called Behave Boldly, Your Dreams Won't Chase Themselves. And it's all about a time capsule. Like it's like a time capsule snapshot of where I was. So I was so frustrated. Like you read books like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and it's all about people in their ivory tower looking back and saying, I remember it was hard. But if you have a Cinderella story and you meet the prince and you live in the castle and you say, oh, I remember it was hard, less relatable to the person who's grinding away, who doesn't know if they're going to succeed or not. So I wrote it kind of for my past self because I wanted somebody to share that they were struggling now. Like there's no fairy tale ending because I'm still going. So that for me was really important. And I loved the thought of like I would just put out a series like as I went. So I'm kind of dabbling at the beginnings of the next book to say, okay, well, what's the snapshot of the, pandemic struggle and the post getting out of that? Because a lot of times we're told these narratives that are tied with a beautiful bow at the end and said, like, okay, well, look at me now, and I have an IPO, and look at all my stock prices. And I don't know. I just find that like it was kind of deflating because I don't think that you remember a version of it being hard, but it's not the same as like remembering you had a blister or having a blister you're recovering from, two different things.
True. Yeah. Huh. Wow, that's cool. I like that idea. I know we could go forever, but I always try to keep these short and sweet. Guys, if you want to reach out, we'll have all of the information in the show notes. The book, the app, whatever we can get, we'll have it in the show notes. So definitely reach out on that level. But I always ask three final questions and then anything that we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners. First and final question, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
I think that what are you willing to give up?
Mhm.
Look at it, because forget, I always kind of think of this analogy. If you had a dinner party and all of the chairs at your table were full, you can't invite another guest. So, how do you know who that person could be if you're not willing to vacate a chair?
Pick someone out of the table. Got it. Um, all right. Second question. What's a favorite quote and why?
I can't remember if this is exactly what it is, but you can't hire someone to do your push-ups for you.
Oh,
I
dang.
feel like it's a Joe Rohn. I feel like I might get that wrong, but there's something about that. There's a lot of things in life that you can't get AI to do, that you can't get a VA to do, and like you have to roll
Yeah,
up your sleeves and do them.
that's good. Reminds me of some stuff I have to do all the time. And third question, what's a favorite or what do you want as a quote or a sentence or whatever on your sentence on your gravestone?
Kiss my pony. Kind of like telling the world where to go because I lived how I wanted to.
I love that. That's so cool. All right, you run into someone in the coffee shop, they listen to this, it inspired them obviously to get through the trenches and just keep stepping into what they want and pivoting as necessary. What's something we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
I think we did touch on it a little bit, but the isolation and feeling rejected is a very, very big part of entrepreneurship because if we think about humans as kind of like herd culture, we're always trying to figure out where we fit in. Even if you're not conscious of it, we're always kind of thinking, where do you fit in? So I'm not married, I don't have kids, all of these things. I don't own real estate, and all of the boxes I'm quote unquote supposed to check, I don't check. So in society, I'm not part of a religion. I'm not part of like all of these things that I'm like supposed to do. I haven't done or I've opted out of, or I'm currently not checking that box, right? So there feels like there is this, like you're out of orbit, like you're just floating around in space, and untethered is an uncomfortable feeling that I just have to be aware of, that that's normal. Like I have to consciously remember I'm choosing that. And when you do feel that way, if you remind yourself that you made the choice to be there and you're not, because what happens is we get pulled so far out because we chose to be there. And then it's like this elastic pull back. So then, because you see that all the time, people will take a big step and then they'll almost like course correct. And it's staying on that path. If you can stay on it, it will get better eventually. I don't know how long eventually is.
Stay on the path. All right. I like that. Guys, I know you'll want to share this. It's so good and real. I love it. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. Let's go out there. If we can change one life or one starfish at a time, together, we can change the world. Thanks for being on, Elise.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.